The massive space station hung in the void like a silver wheel spinning slowly around the planet Nexus Prime. Lights flickered across its surface as thousands of beings moved through its corridors. This was the Galactic Defense Academy, the most important military training facility in known space. Inside the academy, creatures from dozens of worlds walked side by side through the wide hallways. The Vorthak stood nearly 3 meters tall with their thick, chitinous armor and 4 powerful arms. Their heavy footsteps echoed as they moved in perfect formation. The graceful Mindari glided past, their large eyes glowing softly as they communicated through thoughts instead of words. The Kalani clicked and hummed to each other in their mechanical language, their metallic skin reflecting the station lights. Among all these impressive beings, a small group of humans looked almost tiny. They walked together, staying close as alien cadets towered over them. Most of the other species barely noticed the humans. When they did, they whispered quietly among themselves. Yunsu Kim felt every stare as he made his way to the combat training center. His human uniform seemed plain compared to the elaborate gear worn by other species. At 28 years old, he had been one of the best soldiers in Earth's special forces. Here, surrounded by beings who could lift starship engines or read minds, he felt ordinary. The training center was enormous. Holographic displays showed battle scenarios from across the galaxy. Advanced weapons lined the walls. Combat simulators hummed with energy as cadets practiced fighting techniques that had been perfected over centuries of interstellar warfare. Instructor Veltar stood at the center of the room. The Vorthak warrior was a legend at the academy. His dark armor bore the scars of real battles fought in the furthest reaches of space. All 4 of his arms moved independently as he demonstrated combat stances to a group of new cadets. His voice boomed across the training floor. "Combat is about strength," Veltar announced. "It is about power and honor. The weak do not survive in real war." Yunsu joined the other cadets, forming a circle around the instructor. To his left stood Zixandra, a Kalani whose metal body could interface directly with any weapon system. To his right, Thoughtsinger Krial projected calm emotions that helped steady nervous cadets. Both were already showing impressive skills in their training. "Today we practice close combat scenarios," Veltar continued. His 4 eyes scanned the group and stopped on Hyunsu. "You, human. Step forward." Hyunsu moved to the center of the circle. He could feel the attention of every cadet in the room. Whispers started immediately. "The human species is new to our academy," Veltar said loudly. "They claim to be warriors, but look at them, small, weak, no natural weapons or armor. No special abilities." He picked up a standard plasma rifle and held it easily in one hand. "Can you even lift this properly?" Hyunsu took the weapon. It was heavy, designed for beings much larger than humans. He held it with both hands and found a comfortable grip. "Yes, sir. I can manage it." "Manage it," Veltar repeated with something that might have been amusement. "Begin combat simulation level 3. The holographic environment changed instantly. They were now standing in a ruined city with smoke rising from destroyed buildings. Enemy targets appeared at various distances and heights. The simulation was designed to test reaction time, accuracy, and tactical thinking. Veltar raised his weapon and began firing with surgical precision. Each shot found its target perfectly. His movements were fluid and efficient. He could track multiple enemies while moving through cover. Within 2 minutes, he had eliminated 30 targets without missing a single shot. The simulation reset. "Your turn, human." Hyunsu studied the environment for a moment before the targets appeared. When the simulation began, he moved differently than Veltar had. Instead of standing and firing, he immediately rolled behind cover. He used the rubble and destroyed vehicles to hide his movements. When he did fire, he often aimed at walls and ceilings rather than directly at targets. The other cadets looked confused. Several targets remained active while Hyunsu seemed to be missing on purpose. Veltar's expression showed clear disapproval. Then something unexpected happened. The debris that Hyunsu had been shooting began to fall and collapse. Large pieces of concrete crushed multiple targets at once. A fuel tank he had punctured exploded, eliminating an entire group of enemies. By using the environment itself as a weapon, he cleared the simulation in the same time as Veltar, but with half the ammunition. The room fell silent. This was not how combat simulations were supposed to work. The other cadets had never seen anything like it. "Unorthodox," Veltar said finally. His tone was cold. "You did not engage the enemy directly. This is not the way of warriors. But it worked, Sixandra said quietly. Her mechanical voice carried a note of curiosity. Results matter less than method, Veltar replied firmly. Honor in battle comes from facing your enemies with strength, not from tricks and deception. Hyunsu lowered his weapon. Respectfully, sir, on Earth we believe that winning matters more than how you win. Dead soldiers cannot have honor, several cadets gasped. No one spoke to instructors this way, especially not new trainees. Veltar's forehands clenched into fists. Perhaps humans do not understand what it means to be warriors, the instructor said. Perhaps you do not belong in this academy at all. The training session continued, but the mood had changed. Hyunsu could feel the stares and whispers following him. Some cadets seemed interested in his unusual tactics. Others appeared offended by his disrespect for traditional combat methods. After training ended, Hyunsu walked through the academy corridors toward the human quarters. The station operated on a 26-hour cycle to accommodate the biological needs of different species. It was evening shift now, and most cadets were heading to their dormitories or recreational areas. Mi-young Lee was waiting for him near the human section. She had been a pilot in Earth's Stellar Navy before coming to the academy. Like all humans, she looked small compared to their alien classmates, but her eyes were sharp and intelligent. I heard about what happened in training, she said as they walked together. Veltar has never liked humans. You just gave him more reason to cause problems for us. I only did what worked, Hyunsu replied. If they want us here, they need to accept that we fight differently. Do they want us here, though? Mi-young asked. Half the instructors think humans are too primitive for the Galactic Defense Corps. The other half think we are too unpredictable. Either way, we are on trial. They reached the human dormitory section. It was smaller than the areas assigned to other species, with only 20 rooms for the human cadets. Through the windows, they could see Nexus Prime turning slowly below them. The planet was beautiful, with blue oceans and white clouds not unlike Earth. Commander Park wants to see you, Mi-young said. He is in his office. Hyunsu nodded and made his way to the senior human instructor's quarters. Commander Daeho Park had been an admiral in Earth's Navy before accepting the position at the academy. He was one of the few humans who had earned genuine respect from alien instructors, though it had taken him years to achieve it. The commander's office was simple, but organized. Star charts covered one wall, showing the positions of human colonies scattered across local space. Park looked up from his desk as Hyunsu entered. Sit down, Park said. His voice was calm but serious. We need to talk about your future at this academy. Hyunsu took a seat across from the commander. Through the office windows, he could see alien cadets training in zero-gravity chambers and practicing with weapons that could level city blocks. The Galactic Defense Academy represented the pinnacle of military science and tradition. For humans, it was also their chance to prove they belonged among the stars. Sir, I know that my methods today were unusual, Hyunsu began. Park held up a hand to stop him. Unusual methods are not the problem. The problem is that you are making enemies before you have made any allies. This academy operates on respect and hierarchy. If the instructors decide that humans cannot be trusted or trained, we all go home. Earth loses its chance to join the Galactic Defense Corps. The weight of responsibility settled on Hyunsu's shoulders. He had not considered that his actions might affect all of humanity's future in space. The academy was more than just a training facility. It was a test that his entire species had to pass. 3 weeks had passed since Hyunsu's first encounter with Instructor Veltar. The tension between them had only grown stronger with each training session. Other cadets had begun to notice the growing conflict, and whispers followed Hyunsu through the academy corridors. The morning training alarm echoed through the human quarters at 0600 station time. Hyunsu dressed quickly in his standard combat uniform and made his way to the Advanced Tactical Training Center. Today's exercise would take place in the holographic combat chambers, the Academy's most sophisticated training environment. The chamber was enormous, capable of creating perfect simulations of any battlefield condition imaginable. Mountains, forests, urban environments, space stations, even the interiors of starships could be recreated with perfect detail. The holographic projectors were so advanced that cadets could feel heat, cold, wind, and even smell the environments they were fighting in. Veltar stood before a group of 30 cadets from various species. His forearms moved as he explained the day's exercise. Today we simulate the Battle of Kepler Station, he announced. This was a real engagement from the Third Galactic War. Many brave warriors died fighting the Void Hunters in those corridors. Hyun-soo knew the history. The Battle of Kepler Station had been a disaster for the Galactic Defense Corps. Over 3,000 soldiers had died in a poorly planned frontal assault against an entrenched enemy. The battle had become a legend, but not for the right reasons. You will work in teams of 6, Veltar continued. Each team must breach the station's central hub and eliminate all hostile forces. The team that completes the mission fastest and with the fewest casualties wins. The cadets were divided into teams. Hyun-soo found himself grouped with Zixandra the Kalani, Thought Singer Krial the Mindari, and 3 other cadets from different species. It was a good mix of abilities, but Hyun-soo could see the doubt in their eyes. Most cadets still considered humans to be the weakest species at the academy. The simulation began. The teams appeared outside Kepler Station, a massive orbital facility that had been converted into a fortress by enemy forces. Gun turrets lined the outer hull, and enemy fighters patrolled the surrounding space. The only way in was through heavily defended docking bays. Team after team attempted the same basic strategy. They would fight their way through the docking bay, establish a beachhead, and then push toward the central hub through the main corridors. It was the standard military approach that had been taught at the academy for decades. Hyun-soo watched as the first team made their assault. The Vorthak team leader charged directly at the enemy positions with his teammates following close behind. They were strong and brave, but the enemy had superior numbers and defensive positions. Within minutes, half the team had been eliminated by simulated weapons fire. The second team tried a different approach. They attempted to use stealth to sneak past the outer defenses. However, the enemy sensors detected them quickly, and they were pinned down in a crossfire that eliminated them even faster than the first team. When Hyun-soo's team was called forward, he gathered his teammates around him. "We are not going to use the docking bay," he said quietly. Zixandra's mechanical head tilted in confusion. "How else can we enter the station? The hull is too thick to penetrate, and the airlocks are all heavily guarded." "There is always another way," Hyun-soo replied. He pulled up a holographic display of the station's structure. "Look here. This section was damaged in the original battle. The hull plating is weakened, but it is not completely breached." Thought Singer Krial projected curiosity through her telepathic abilities. "The academy records show that area as impassable." "Because no one has tried the right approach," Hyun-soo said. He began outlining his plan to the team. Instead of attacking the heavily defended docking bays, Hyun-soo led his team to the damaged section of the station. The hull was indeed weakened, with twisted metal and exposed internal structures. Most military commanders would have dismissed it as impossible to breach without heavy equipment. Hyun-soo had his team gather debris from destroyed ships floating nearby. Using their weapons, they heated and shaped the metal pieces into makeshift cutting tools. It was slow work, but they managed to create a small opening in the weakened hull without triggering the station's alarm systems. Once inside, they found themselves in a section of the station that the enemy had abandoned because of radiation leaks from damaged power systems. Hyun-soo had studied the station's original blueprints and knew that this area connected to the central hub through maintenance tunnels that most species were too large to use comfortably. "This is madness," whispered Torgak, a young Vorthak on the team. "We will be irradiated before we reach the target." "The radiation levels are not fatal for short exposure," Hyun-soo replied, "and the enemy will not expect an attack from this direction." They crawled through the narrow maintenance tunnels for what felt like hours. The radiation made everyone uncomfortable, and the tight spaces were challenging for the larger team members. But Hyun-soo's plan worked. They emerged directly into the central hub behind the main enemy defensive positions. The enemy forces were all facing outward, expecting attacks from the main corridors. Hyun-soo's team attacked from behind, using the element of surprise to eliminate the hostile forces quickly and efficiently. The mission was completed in half the time of any other team, with 0 casualties. When the simulation ended, the combat chamber fell silent. The other team stared at Hyun-soo and his companions in amazement. Even some of the instructors looked surprised by the unconventional approach. Veltar's expression was darker than usual. His 4 hands clenched and unclenched as he reviewed the mission data. "Explain your tactics, human," he demanded. "I use the environment to our advantage," Hyun-soo replied calmly. The enemy expected a conventional assault, so I gave them something different. You broke protocol, Veltar said angrily. Military operations follow established procedures for good reasons. Your reckless approach could have gotten your entire team killed. But it did not, Zixandra interjected. Her mechanical voice carried a note of admiration. The human strategy was both creative and effective. Other cadets began murmuring their agreement. Thought Singer Creole projected feelings of respect and curiosity toward Hyunsu. Even some of the more traditional species seemed impressed by the results. Veltar's anger was clearly visible now. His armor plates shifted as his muscles tensed. Results achieved through dishonorable means are worthless, he declared. A true warrior faces his enemies directly, not through cowardly tricks and deception. With respect, sir, Hyunsu said. The enemy soldiers who died in the real Battle of Kepler Station might have preferred to go home alive rather than die honorably in a failed assault. The challenge in Hyunsu's voice was unmistakable. Several cadets gasped at his boldness. No one spoke to senior instructors this way, especially not trainees who had been at the academy for less than a month. Veltar stepped forward, using his impressive height to loom over the human. You question military tradition that has served the galaxy for thousands of years. You show disrespect for the warriors who died in that battle. Perhaps you do not understand what honor means. I understand that honor does not help dead soldiers protect their families, Hyunsu replied. On Earth, we believe that the greatest honor is in achieving victory while keeping your people alive. The confrontation was attracting attention from across the training center. Other instructors and cadets had stopped their activities to watch the argument between the decorated Vorthak warrior and the small human trainee. Commander Park appeared at the edge of the crowd. His face showed concern as he observed the tense situation. He had warned Hyunsu about making enemies among the faculty, but the young soldier seemed determined to stand his ground. Enough, Veltar said finally. His voice carried the authority of decades of military service. Return to your quarters, human. We will discuss this matter later. As the cadets dispersed, Hyunsu could feel the weight of many stares. Some looked at him with newfound respect, others with concern. A few seemed to view him as a troublemaker who was disrupting the academy's traditional order. Mi-young Lee caught up with him as he left the training center. You are playing a dangerous game, she warned. Veltar has influence with the academy leadership. If he decides you are a threat to discipline and order, he can have you expelled. Then maybe it is time to show them what humans are really capable of, Hyunsu replied. We cannot earn respect by trying to be like everyone else. We have to prove that our way of thinking has value. That evening, Hyunsu sat in the observation deck looking out at the stars. Nexus Prime rotated slowly below, its surface covered with the lights of cities built by dozens of different species. The Galactic Defense Academy represented the best of interstellar cooperation, but it was also bound by traditions that might not serve it well in future conflicts. Unknown to Hyunsu, Veltar was in his private quarters reviewing the training records from the day's exercises. The Vorthak warrior was troubled by what he had seen. The humans' tactics were undeniably effective, but they challenged everything he believed about proper military conduct. As he studied the data, Veltar began to formulate a plan. If the human wanted to prove that his methods were superior, the academy mess hall was buzzing with conversation during the evening meal period. Cadets from dozens of species sat at long tables, sharing food and discussing the day's training exercises. The air was filled with a mixture of languages and the smell of foods from countless worlds. Hyunsu sat with the other human cadets at their usual table near the large observation windows. Outside, the stars wheeled slowly as the academy rotated to provide artificial gravity. The view was beautiful, but Hyunsu found it hard to concentrate on anything except the stares he was receiving from other tables. Word of his confrontation with Instructor Veltar had spread throughout the academy. Some cadets looked at him with curiosity, others with respect, and a few with obvious disapproval. The academy had strict social hierarchies, and challenging a senior instructor was almost unheard of. You need to be more careful, Mi-young said quietly as she picked at her synthetic protein ration. I heard that Veltar requested a meeting with the Academy Council about human training protocols. What does that mean? Asked Jinho, one of the younger human cadets. Commander Park, who had been silent during most of the meal, finally spoke up. It means they are discussing whether humans belong here at all. Veltar has been pushing for our removal since the day we arrived. Your little demonstration today gave him ammunition for his arguments. Hyun-soo set down his eating utensil and looked around the table. So what do you want me to do? Pretend to be something I am not? Follow tactics that I know are wrong just to make them comfortable? I want you to think about more than just yourself, Park replied firmly. There are 20 human cadets in this academy. Earth spent 5 years negotiating for these positions. If we fail here, humanity loses its chance to join the Galactic Defense Corps. We become an isolated species stuck in our own solar system while the rest of the galaxy moves forward without us. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on Hyun-soo's shoulders. He had not fully considered how his actions might affect Earth's future among the stars. The Galactic Defense Corps was not just a military organization. It was the key to trade agreements, technological exchange, and peaceful relationships with dozens of alien civilizations. Before anyone could respond, a large shadow fell across their table. Instructor Veltar stood behind Hyun-soo, his forearms crossed over his armored chest. The mess hall grew noticeably quieter as other cadets realized what was happening. Trainee Hyun-soo Kim, Veltar's voice boomed across the dining area. I require your presence for an official matter. Hyun-soo stood and faced the towering Vorthak warrior. Even though he had expected this confrontation, he felt small and vulnerable standing before the decorated instructor. Yes, sir. What can I do for you? You have repeatedly shown disrespect for military tradition and proper combat doctrine, Veltar announced loudly enough for everyone in the mess hall to hear. You question the wisdom of proven tactics that have served the galaxy for millennia. You demonstrate techniques that are dishonorable and cowardly. The mess hall had become completely silent. Hundreds of alien eyes watched the confrontation between the experienced star soldier and the human trainee. Commander Park started to rise from his seat, but Veltar held up one hand to stop him. These are serious accusations that affect not just your personal standing, but the reputation of your entire species, Veltar continued. Therefore, according to Academy Regulation 7 Alpha, I formally challenge you to single combat to resolve this dispute. Gasps echoed throughout the mess hall. Formal challenges were rare at the Academy, reserved for the most serious conflicts between personnel. Most cadets had never seen one issued, and certainly not from an instructor to a trainee. Commander Park shot to his feet. Instructor Veltar, this is highly irregular. Trainee Kim has been at the Academy for less than a month. The experience difference makes this challenge unreasonable. The regulation allows any Academy member to issue or accept a formal challenge when matters of honor are involved, Veltar replied. The human has questioned my competence as an instructor and insulted the military traditions I represent. If he truly believes his methods are superior, let him prove it in fair combat. Hyun-soo felt every eye in the mess hall focused on him. He understood the trap he was in. If he accepted the challenge, he would face an opponent with decades more experience and natural physical advantages that seemed impossible to overcome. If he refused, he would be branded a coward, and humanity's reputation at the Academy would be destroyed. What are the terms of this challenge? Hyun-soo asked, trying to keep his voice steady. A slight smile appeared on Veltar's alien features. Combat will take place in the Crucible, the Academy's most advanced training facility. We will use live weapons set to maximum stun setting. The neurological feedback from the training systems will provide real consequences for failure. Medical teams will be standing by, but permanent injury or death remains possible if safety protocols are exceeded. The Crucible was legendary among Academy cadets. It was a massive chamber that could simulate any environment or battlefield condition with perfect accuracy. The weapons used there were nearly as dangerous as actual combat equipment. Only the most advanced cadets were allowed to train in the Crucible, and never without extensive supervision. The challenge will be witnessed by the Academy Council and broadcast to all Academy personnel, Veltar continued. Victory conditions are simple. First combatant to surrender, become incapacitated, or die loses the challenge. Do you accept these terms? Hyun-soo looked around the mess hall. He saw fear on the faces of his fellow humans, curiosity on the faces of alien cadets, and satisfaction on the faces of instructors who had never wanted humans at the Academy. This moment would determine not just his own future, but the future of his entire species in galactic affairs. I accept. Hyun-soo said clearly. The mess hall erupted in excited conversation. Cadets began talking rapidly in dozens of different languages. Some seemed shocked that the human had accepted such an obviously dangerous challenge. Others appeared eager to witness what they expected to be a quick demonstration of alien superiority over human weakness. Excellent, Veltar said with obvious satisfaction. The challenge will take place in 3 days during the evening training period. That will give you time to prepare and say goodbye to your fellow humans. As Veltar walked away, Commander Park grabbed Hyun-soo's arm. What have you done? He whispered urgently. Veltar has never lost a formal challenge. He has 40 years of combat experience and has fought in 3 actual wars. You just signed your own death warrant. Maybe, Hyun-soo replied quietly. But if I had refused, we would all be going home in shame anyway. At least this way, we have a chance to prove that humans belong here. Mi-young looked pale as she stared at her friend. This is not a training exercise, Hyun-soo. Veltar could kill you in there, and it would be completely legal under Academy regulations. Then I better make sure he does not get the chance, Hyun-soo said with more confidence than he actually felt. That night, Hyun-soo lay in his narrow dormitory bed staring at the ceiling. Through the small window he could see the stars beyond Nexus Prime. Earth was somewhere out there, so far away that its light would take years to reach him. His family, his friends, his entire world seemed impossibly distant. He thought about his father, who had served in Earth's military during the border conflicts. His father had always told him that a soldier's greatest weapon was not his equipment or his training, but his ability to think clearly under pressure. The enemy will always have advantages, his father had said. Your job is to find advantages they do not expect. A soft knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Hyun-soo opened it to find Zixandra standing in the corridor. The Kalani's metallic features showed concern. I wanted to speak with you before the challenge, she said in her precise mechanical voice. Your tactics in today's training were remarkable. You saw solutions that none of us considered. Thank you, Hyun-soo replied. But seeing solutions and surviving combat with Veltar are very different things. Perhaps, Zixandra said. But I have accessed the Academy's combat records. Veltar has won every challenge through superior strength and conventional tactics. He has never faced an opponent who thinks as differently as you do. That small encouragement meant more to Hyun-soo than she probably realized. If even one alien cadet believed he had a chance, maybe his situation was not completely hopeless. Over the next 2 days, word of the challenge spread throughout the Academy. Betting pools emerged among the cadets with odds heavily favoring Veltar. Some instructors began making preparations for the human program to be terminated after what they expected to be a humiliating defeat. But a few beings began to pay closer attention to the human cadets and their unusual training methods. They watched as Hyun-soo prepared for the challenge, not through traditional combat drills, but by studying the Academy's technical manuals and environmental systems. Something unprecedented was about to happen in the Crucible, though none of them could have predicted exactly what that would be. The challenge would test more than just combat skills. It would determine whether there was room in the galaxy's military traditions for a completely new way of thinking about warfare. The countdown to the confrontation had begun, and with it, the Academy's data archives were vast, containing military records from across the galaxy spanning thousands of years. While other cadets attended regular training sessions, Hyun-soo spent every free moment studying combat footage and battle analyses. His eyes burned from staring at holographic displays, but he forced himself to continue. He had found dozens of recordings featuring Instructor Veltar's combat history. The Vorthak warrior's reputation was well earned. In battle after battle, Veltar had demonstrated superior tactics, overwhelming firepower, and perfect adherence to military doctrine. His record was flawless, with not a single defeat in 40 years of service. But as Hyun-soo studied the recordings more carefully, he began to notice patterns. Veltar's victories were always achieved through the same basic approach: superior strength, advanced weapons, and conventional tactics applied with perfect precision. He had never faced an enemy who fought in ways that military doctrine did not anticipate. More concerning were the subtle details that others might have missed. In several battles, Veltar had pushed the boundaries of acceptable conduct. He had used excessive force against defeated enemies, ignored surrender attempts, and bent Academy honor codes to their breaking point. Officially, his record was perfect. Unofficially, there were questions about his methods that no one seemed willing to address. Finding anything useful? Mi-young asked as she sat down beside him in the data archives. Maybe, Hyun-soo replied without looking away from the holographic display. Veltar has never lost because he has never faced anyone who could not be defeated by conventional means. But there are gaps in his experience. What kind of gaps? Hyun-soo pulled up a tactical analysis of the Battle of Outer Reach, where Veltar had earned his most famous victory. Look at this. The enemy used standard defensive formations, conventional weapons, and predictable tactics. Veltar countered with superior firepower and textbook assault strategies. It was a perfect example of traditional military doctrine. So what is the problem with that? The problem is that every enemy Veltar has fought has used the same basic approach to warfare. They all followed the same military principles taught at academies throughout the galaxy. He has never faced an opponent who thought completely differently about combat. Mi-young studied the battle records with growing understanding. You think he cannot adapt to unconventional tactics? I think he has been winning for so long using the same methods that he might not know how to respond when those methods do not work, Hyun-soo said. But I could be completely wrong. In 2 days I will find out. That evening, Commander Park found Hyun-soo in the observation deck staring out at the stars. The older officer sat down beside him without speaking for several minutes. Finally, he broke the silence. I need to tell you something about why humans are really here, Park said quietly. The official story is that Earth applied for membership in the Galactic Defense Corps and was accepted on a trial basis. That is not the complete truth. Hyun-soo turned to look at his commander with surprise. What do you mean? Park sighed deeply before continuing. 15 years ago, the galaxy was facing a military crisis. The Outer Rim conflicts had been raging for over a century with no resolution in sight. Conventional military strategies were failing against enemies who used guerrilla tactics, improvised weapons, and unconventional warfare. I remember reading about those conflicts in the Academy database. What you did not read was that the Galactic Defense Corps was desperate for new solutions. They had tried every traditional approach to warfare and nothing was working. Millions of soldiers were dying in battles that never seemed to end. Park pulled up a holographic display showing star charts of the conflict zones. Then Earth made first contact with a Corps survey ship that had been damaged by raiders. Human military advisors helped them develop new tactics to deal with the unconventional threats they were facing. Within 6 months, conflicts that had lasted for decades were finally resolved. Hyun-soo stared at the commander in amazement. Humans ended the Outer Rim conflicts?
Human tactical thinking provided the solutions that traditional military doctrine could not, Park confirmed.
But there was political pressure from established member species who did not want to admit that a primitive world had succeeded where they had failed. So the official records were classified and humans were quietly admitted to the Academy on a trial basis. Why are you telling me this now? Park's expression was grave. Because if you lose this challenge, the political opponents of human membership will use it as proof that we do not belong in the Corps. They will claim that our previous successes were just luck, and that we cannot be trusted in real military situations. Earth will be expelled, and the galaxy will lose access to the kind of innovative thinking that ended the Outer Rim conflicts. The weight of this revelation was overwhelming. Hyun-soo had thought he was fighting for his own future, and that of the human cadets at the Academy. Now he realized he was fighting for Earth's place in galactic civilization itself. No pressure, he said with weak humor. Actually, there is something else, Park said. I have been authorized to give you access to classified human military records. Tactics and strategies that were used to end the Outer Rim conflicts. Information that might help you understand how human thinking can overcome superior force. Park handed him a datapad with the highest security encryption Hyun-soo had ever seen. Study these carefully, but do not share them with anyone. This information is classified at the highest levels of both Earth's government and the Galactic Defense Corps. That night, Hyun-soo spent hours reviewing the classified records. What he found was fascinating and disturbing. Human military advisors had indeed provided solutions that ended decades of conflict, but their methods had been so unconventional that many alien commanders had initially refused to implement them. The tactics involved psychological warfare, environmental manipulation, and creative uses of technology that military doctrine had never considered. Instead of trying to match enemy strength with superior strength, human advisors had found ways to turn enemy advantages into weaknesses. In one case, Human strategists had ended a 3-year siege by convincing the enemy that their own supply lines were contaminated. No shots were fired, but the enemy abandoned their positions and surrendered. In another situation, humans had used the enemy's communication systems against them, creating confusion and mistrust that led to the collapse of their command structure. These were not the honorable face-to-face battles that military academies celebrated in their history lessons. They were examples of warfare as problem-solving, where victory came through intelligence and creativity rather than superior firepower. As Hyun-soo studied the records, he began to understand something important about the challenge he was facing. Veltar represented more than just one instructor with traditional views. He represented an entire military establishment that was uncomfortable with change, even change that might save lives and achieve better results. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor to the human quarters. Thought singer Creole, the Mindari cadet who had been on Hyun-soo's team during the Kepler station simulation, requested a private meeting. "I have been thinking about your challenge with Instructor Veltar," she said in her soft, telepathic voice. "There are things you should know about Mindari combat philosophy that might help you." Hyun-soo was surprised. The Mindari were known for their peaceful nature and telepathic abilities, not for military tactics. "What kind of things?" "My species learned long ago that physical strength is not the only form of power in combat," Creole explained. "Mental flexibility, environmental awareness, and psychological understanding can be just as effective as weapons and armor. We have techniques for reading opponents and predicting their actions. Can you teach me these techniques?" "Some of them, yes. But more importantly, I can tell you about Veltar's weaknesses. All beings have psychological patterns, and I have observed his during our training sessions." For the next several hours, Creole shared insights about Mindari combat philosophy and Veltar's behavioral patterns. The Vorthak instructor was supremely confident in his abilities, but that confidence was also a vulnerability. He had never been truly challenged, so he had never learned to adapt when his initial strategies failed. "He expects you to fight like a smaller, weaker version of himself," Creole explained. "When you do something completely different, it will take him time to understand and respond. That confusion might be your greatest advantage." As evening approached, Hyun-soo felt as prepared as he could be. He had studied Veltar's combat history, learned about human tactical innovations, and gained insights into alien combat philosophy. But he also knew that all the preparation in the world might not be enough against an opponent with such overwhelming advantages in experience and physical capability. The challenge would take place the following evening. Word had spread throughout the academy, and viewing spaces in the Crucible's observation galleries were being reserved by cadets and instructors from dozens of species. Some came expecting to witness an impressive demonstration of Vorthak superiority. Others hoped to see something unprecedented. That night, as Hyun-soo tried to sleep, he thought about his father's words about finding unexpected advantages. The Crucible was unlike any training facility Hyun-soo had ever seen. The massive chamber stretched nearly 2 kilometers in length and stood 5 levels high, with holographic projectors capable of creating any environment imaginable. Viewing galleries lined the upper levels, already packed with hundreds of academy personnel who had come to witness the formal challenge. As Hyun-soo stood in the preparation chamber, he could hear the murmur of alien voices discussing the upcoming combat. Most seemed to consider the outcome a foregone conclusion. The betting odds heavily favored Veltar, with some bookmakers refusing to take wagers on the human at all. Commander Park entered the preparation chamber, his face grave. "The Academy Council has finalized the combat parameters," he said. "The environment will be a derelict space station with multiple levels, 0 gravity sections, and various environmental hazards. Both combatants will have access to standard weapons and equipment." "What about the safety protocols?" Mi-young asked. She had been authorized to serve as Hyun-soo's second for the challenge. "Minimal," Park replied. "Weapons are set to maximum stun, but the neurological feedback systems are active. Serious injury or death is possible if the safety limits are exceeded. Medical teams are standing by, but they cannot intervene until the combat is concluded." Hyun-soo nodded silently. He had expected as much. Formal challenges were serious affairs with real consequences for the participants. He checked his equipment one final time. A standard human assault rifle, basic armor, and a collection of tools that had raised eyebrows among the academy staff. Why are you carrying construction equipment instead of additional weapons? Park asked, looking at the improvised tools Hyunsu had selected. Because weapons are tools for specific jobs, Hyunsu replied. I need tools that can do jobs that weapons cannot. In the opposite preparation chamber, Veltar was making his own final preparations. The Vorthak warrior wore his ceremonial combat armor, polished to a mirror finish and bearing the honors he had earned in decades of military service. His forearms allowed him to carry multiple weapons simultaneously: plasma rifles, energy shields, and close combat weapons that could cut through starship hulls. Academy instructors surrounded him, offering advice and encouragement. Veltar listened politely, but his confidence was absolute. He had never lost a formal challenge, and he could not imagine losing to a human who had been at the academy for less than a month. Remember that humans are unpredictable, warned Instructor Zekmoth, a veteran Kalani officer. Their tactics are often illogical, but sometimes effective. Illogical tactics work only against unprepared opponents, Veltar replied. I have studied every combat recording of human military actions. Their methods are crude but occasionally clever. I am ready for whatever tricks this young warrior might attempt. The Academy Council took their positions in the central observation platform. Academy Commander Thulrax, a distinguished Mindari who had led the institution for over 2 decades, activated the communication system to address all observers. We are gathered to witness a formal challenge between Instructor Veltar of the Vorthak, Stellar Marines, and Trainee Hyunsu Kim of the Human Defense Forces. His telepathic voice reached every mind in the chamber. This challenge was issued under Academy Regulation 7 Alpha to resolve matters of honor and military doctrine. Combat will continue until one participant surrenders, becomes incapacitated, or dies. The holographic systems activated, transforming the crucible into a perfect replica of an abandoned orbital station. Twisted metal corridors stretched in all directions, with flickering lights and exposed power conduits creating an atmosphere of decay and danger. Gravity generators functioned in some sections but not others, creating a complex 3-dimensional battlefield. Hyunsu entered the simulation at one end of the station, while Veltar appeared at the opposite end. Between them lay a maze of corridors, chambers, and maintenance shafts that would challenge even experienced spacers to navigate. The combat began immediately. Veltar advanced through the station using standard military procedures, clearing each corridor methodically while maintaining constant communication with his sensors. His forearms allowed him to carry a weapon, shield, scanner, and communication device simultaneously, giving him significant tactical advantages. Through the station's communication system, observers could hear his confident progress. Section A7 clear. Advancing to Junction A8. No contact with enemy forces. Hyunsu took a completely different approach. Instead of advancing toward his opponent, he immediately began studying the station's internal systems. His tools allowed him to access maintenance panels and technical systems that most combatants would have ignored completely. What is the human doing? Asked an alien cadet in the observation gallery. He is not advancing toward the enemy. He appears to be examining the station's technical systems, replied another observer. This is not standard combat behavior. In the simulation, Hyunsu had accessed a maintenance terminal and was rapidly downloading schematics of the station's power grid, environmental systems, and structural layout. The information revealed something that military tactical databases had not included. The station had been abandoned due to critical system failures that made certain sections extremely dangerous. While Veltar continued his methodical advance, Hyunsu used his knowledge of the station's systems to move through maintenance passages and service tunnels that were too small for the larger Vorthak warrior. He avoided direct confrontation while positioning himself strategically throughout the facility. Contact! Veltar's voice boomed through the communication system as his sensors detected movement. He had reached the station's central hub and spotted Hyunsu on a higher level. Target acquired. Engaging. Plasma bolts erupted from Veltar's weapons, striking the walls around Hyunsu's position with devastating accuracy. The human rolled behind cover as molten metal scattered around him. The power difference between their weapons was immediately obvious. Veltar's plasma rifles could punch through bulkheads that Hyunsu's projectile weapon could barely dent. The human is trapped, an instructor observed from the gallery. Veltar has superior firepower and defensive position. But Hyun-Soo was not trying to match firepower. While Veltar focused on the position where he had last seen his opponent, the human was using the station's service passages to move to an entirely different location. The maintenance tunnels connected throughout the facility, allowing movement that tactical scanners could not easily track. Veltar advanced cautiously toward the position where he had seen Hyun-Soo take cover. His forearms held weapons at ready as he approached. But when he reached the location, he found it empty except for a small device that Hyun-Soo had left behind. The device was one of Hyun-Soo's improvised tools, modified to interface with the station's power systems. When Veltar's scanner beam triggered its sensor, it activated a cascade failure in the nearby electrical grid. Emergency lights failed, artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, and atmospheric processors began venting oxygen into space. What is happening? Veltar demanded as his perfect battlefield environment suddenly became chaotic and unpredictable. The station's systems were failing around him, creating hazards that had not existed moments before. Hyun-Soo's voice came from the station's communication system, but his location was impossible to determine. You studied my combat methods, but you did not study me. I am not just a soldier. I am an engineer. This station is now my weapon. The lights went out completely, plunging most of the station into darkness. Veltar's advanced sensors still functioned, but the electromagnetic interference from failing power systems created false readings and phantom contacts. His overwhelming technological advantages were being neutralized by the environment itself. Emergency. Systems activated throughout the station as Hyun-Soo continued manipulating the facility's controls from hidden locations. Blast doors slammed shut, cutting off Veltar's planned routes. Atmospheric processors created artificial wind currents that affected projectile trajectories. Even artificial gravity became unreliable, changing without warning and forcing the Vorthak warrior to constantly adapt his movement. This is not honorable combat. Veltar roared as he struggled to maintain his footing during another gravity fluctuation. You fight like a coward, hiding instead of facing me directly. I fight like a human, Hyun-Soo replied from somewhere in the darkness. We use every advantage available because we cannot afford to lose. Veltar tried to use his superior strength to force his way through a blast door that had closed across his path. His powerful arms could bend the metal, but the effort left him exposed and exhausted. As he struggled with the barrier, Hyun-Soo appeared silently behind him through a maintenance hatch that military doctrine said was too small for combat use. The human carried a weapon, but he did not fire immediately. Instead, he attached another of his improvised devices to Veltar's armor. The Vorthak warrior spun around, but Hyun-Soo had already disappeared back into the maintenance systems. What did you do? Veltar demanded, checking his armor for damage. The device appeared to be nothing more than a simple electromagnetic pulse generator, insufficient to penetrate his military-grade protection. I gave you a choice. Hyun-Soo's voice came from the communication system. The silence in the Crucible's observation galleries lasted for nearly a full minute after Veltar's surrender. Hundreds of alien beings sat in stunned amazement, trying to process what they had just witnessed. The legendary Vorthak instructor, undefeated in 40 years of military service, had been completely outmaneuvered by a human trainee who had been at the academy for less than a month. Academy Commander Thulrax was the first to speak, his telepathic voice reaching every mind in the chamber. The formal challenge is concluded. Victory is awarded to Trainee Hyun-Soo Kim of the Human Defense Forces. The announcement broke the spell of silence. Excited conversations erupted throughout the galleries as cadets and instructors discussed the unprecedented outcome. Some seemed thrilled by the unexpected result. Others appeared troubled by the implications of such an unconventional victory. In the simulation chamber, medical teams quickly entered to check both combatants. Veltar was physically unharmed but clearly shaken by his defeat. His armor systems had been disrupted by Hyun-Soo's electromagnetic device, but no permanent damage had been done. The Vorthak warrior sat in silence as technicians restored his equipment to normal function. Hyun-Soo was also uninjured, though exhausted from the intense mental effort required to manipulate the station's systems while avoiding direct combat. As he left the simulation chamber, he was surrounded by Academy personnel asking questions about his tactics and techniques. How did you learn to interface with the station's control system so quickly? Asked Dr. Zentara, the Academy's chief technology instructor. Engineering training, Hyun-soo replied simply. On Earth, military personnel are expected to understand the equipment and environments they operate in. I studied the station schematics and found ways to use the systems as tools. But those tactics are not covered in any military doctrine, protested another instructor. How can such methods be taught or replicated? Maybe that is the problem with military doctrine, Hyun-soo said quietly. If every solution is written in a manual, then every enemy can read the same manual and prepare countermeasures. Commander Park appeared through the crowd of questioners and escorted Hyun-soo away from the gathering. As they walked through the academy corridors, the older officer's expression showed a mixture of pride and concern. You have just changed everything, Park said once they were alone. That performance will be studied and debated throughout the galaxy. Some will see it as brilliant innovation. Others will view it as a dangerous departure from proven military principles. Which side are you on? Hyun-soo asked. I am on the side of keeping humans alive and effective in combat, Park replied. Your methods worked, but they also challenged thousands of years of military tradition. That will make some very powerful beings uncomfortable. Over the following days, the aftermath of the challenge continued to ripple through the academy. Formal inquiries were launched to determine whether Hyun-soo's tactics had violated academy regulations. Military scholars arrived from across the galaxy to study recordings of the combat and analyze the implications for future warfare. The reaction among academy cadets was mixed, but generally positive. Many alien species had their own unconventional approaches to problem solving that had been suppressed by traditional military doctrine. Hyun-soo's victory gave them permission to explore alternatives to standard procedures. Zixandra approached Hyun-soo during a meal period, her mechanical features showing obvious excitement.
I have been studying your combat methods, she said.
The way you use the station's systems as weapons opens up entirely new possibilities for tactical applications. That is just basic engineering, Hyun-soo replied modestly. Any species with advanced technology should be able to develop similar techniques. But we do not think about technology the way humans do, Zixandra explained. We see systems as tools with specific functions. You see them as resources that can be adapted for any purpose. That is a fundamentally different approach to problem solving. Thought singer Creole joined their conversation, her telepathic voice carrying notes of admiration. Among my people, we have always known that mental flexibility is more powerful than physical strength. But we never learned to apply that principle to technological systems the way humans do. Perhaps we can teach each other, Hyun-soo suggested. Humans have much to learn from Mindari psychological techniques and Kalani technical knowledge. Working together, we might develop approaches that none of our species could achieve alone. The most unexpected reaction came from Veltar himself. 3 days after the challenge, the Vorthak instructor requested a private meeting with Hyun-soo. They met in one of the academy's smaller training rooms, away from the crowds of curious cadets and faculty members. I have spent 40 years believing that military strength came from superior firepower and perfect adherence to proven tactics, Veltar said without preamble. You defeated me without firing a shot in direct combat. This has forced me to reconsider many assumptions about warfare. Hyun-soo had expected anger or resentment from the defeated instructor. Instead, he found genuine curiosity and a willingness to learn. Your methods were not dishonorable, he said carefully. They were just different from what I expected. They were effective, Veltar replied. In real combat, effectiveness is the only measurement that matters. I have requested assignment to the human training program. I want to learn these unconventional approaches and integrate them into academy curriculum. You want to learn from humans? Hyun-soo asked in surprise. I want to learn from the species that ended the Outer Rim conflicts when no one else could find solutions, Veltar said. Commander Thulrax briefed me on humanity's classified military history. Your people have consistently found answers to problems that stymied more advanced civilizations. That is a valuable capability. The formal recognition came 2 weeks later. The Academy Council convened in full session to address the implications of the challenge and its outcome. Representatives from dozens of member species participated in the discussions, both in person and through quantum communication links. Academy Commander Thulrax announced the Council's decision to the assembled Academy personnel. After extensive review and debate, the Council has reached several important conclusions. First, Trainee Hyun-soo Kim's tactics, while unconventional, did not violate any academy regulations or principles of honorable combat. Applause erupted from the human section, along with supporting cheers from many alien cadets who had been impressed by the innovative approach to warfare. Second, Thulrax continued, the Council recognizes that military doctrine must evolve to address new challenges and opportunities. Effective immediately, the Academy curriculum will be expanded to include unconventional warfare techniques, environmental manipulation tactics, and adaptive problem-solving methods. This announcement generated more mixed reactions. Some instructors seemed enthusiastic about exploring new approaches to military training. Others appeared concerned about abandoning time-tested methods that had served the galaxy for millennia. Finally, the commander concluded, the Galactic Defense Corps formally accepts humanity as a full-member species, with all rights and responsibilities that entails. Commander Deho Park is hereby promoted to senior faculty status and will oversee the integration of human tactical doctrines into standard academy training. The cheers from the human section were deafening, but they were joined by applause from throughout the assembly. Even species that had initially opposed human membership seemed to recognize the value of the innovative thinking that humanity brought to galactic military affairs. In the months that followed, the changes at the Academy were dramatic and far-reaching. Human instructors began teaching courses on adaptive tactics and environmental warfare. Alien cadets learned to think beyond standard procedures and consider unconventional solutions to military problems. The rigid hierarchies that had defined Academy culture for centuries became more flexible and collaborative. Hyun-Soo himself became something of a legend among Academy cadets. His victory over Veltar was studied in tactical classes and discussed in military academies across the galaxy. But he remained focused on his training and his goal of becoming an effective officer in the Galactic Defense Corps. 6 months later, Hyun-Soo stood before a new class of mixed-species cadets in one of the Academy's advanced tactical training centers. The group included humans, Vorthak, Kalani, Mindari, and representatives from a dozen other species. They looked at him with a mixture of respect and curiosity. Combat is problem-solving under pressure, he began, repeating lessons he had learned from his father years ago on Earth. Your weapons, your armor, your training, these are just tools for solving problems. The most important tool you have is your ability to think differently than your enemies expect. He gestured toward the advanced holographic training systems that surrounded them. Today we will practice scenarios where conventional tactics fail. You will learn to use your environment, your technology, and your creativity to find solutions that no manual has ever described. A young Vorthak cadet raised one of his forehands. But instructor, what if our methods seem dishonorable to our enemies? Hyun-Soo smiled at the question. It was one that Veltar himself might have asked months earlier. Honor comes from protecting those who